Hi everyone, I'm Tim and welcome to my talk about Xamarin. As most of you know, we had James Montemagno from Xamarin came to give a talk here in this very building in October. He gave quite an in-depth talk for a whole session on the technologies and history behind Xamarin and how it all fits together. And you'll be quite relieved to know I'm not going to cover any of that same material again because you obviously all know it. And if you don't, that was videoed by Pusher, so you can go on the internet to watch it. What I'm going to give you a talk, which should really be called My First Xamarin Forms App. So I'm going to tell you how I've created an application in my spare time to solve a real problem I have at home, and sort of try and convey how accessible this technology is, even just in a few evenings' work. Also, back in October, we had Thomas Bartolski come to Azure Oxford, our sister group, to tell us about saving the world with IoT, where he was using Internet of Things technology to try and save energy and heating systems. Well, he was looking at kind of at quite a large scale, sort of wind farms and geothermal vents. I was looking more about my home heating system. So my initial problem was that we've got kind of a strange-shaped house with an extension, and quite often we found that some of the rooms are really, really hot, whereas the rooms we're in were cold, and it was impossible to sort of manage these things. So we invested in this TADO system, which involves Internet of Things radiator valves, which you can plug onto individual radiators, and they'll have a temperature, and they can switch on and off radiators, and to keep temperature in the room consistent. And you can set zones, and it's all really good. And it's managed by a mobile application or a web app, which is very similar to the mobile application, where you can click on the zones, or you can set up a schedule, or you can override this with zones, which you can click on, set a temperature and a time you want that to be overridden for. We enjoy this system so much, we've kind of expanded this now to our entire house. We've got sort of 12 zones, and we've also bought an extension kit, which allows the boiler to be controlled from it, so that it turns the boiler on and off whenever any radiator requires heat. The mobile application kind of doesn't scale very well. So if we just want to turn all the heating off for an hour just to let the hot water heat up, it's about 5 or 6 minutes of clicking on a button, dragging sliders, moving things around. So what I wanted was just a simple application where I could just click a button, turn off the radiators for an hour. And also, if you on the system, you can turn the dials on the radiators, and that will lock them to be at that temperature forever, basically. So it'd be good to have a button where you can say cancel anything anyone's accidentally knocked a radiator. Obviously, the first decision was what technology to use. So I surveyed a bunch of different user interface technologies, and what I wanted was obviously an Android application, so I could have it on my phone. My wife has been known to defect to Apple occasionally, so I wanted the possibility to have an iPhone app if the need arose in the future. And also for ease of development, I wanted it just to run on my Windows laptop. I've got a Windows Home on my laptop, so I can't run Android emulators, and I don't have a Mac, so I can't create a Mac emulator. So I'm kind of, for development needs, I'm stuck to using Windows. Xamarin Forms, ticked all these boxes, and it's also a fairly mature technology, so I was happy to use that. But what to drive it? So how would I actually control these radiators from a phone? There's an IFTTT integration for the TADO system, although it's quite clunky and didn't have the power that I required. It does have a REST API, although it is unsupported and it's undocumented. So I was resorted to hunting the internet, trying to find various blog posts of different versions of the API and trying them out. So initially, I actually resorted to using WSL2 to try out some curl commands, just typing things in and cutting and pasting things. Some success, but it was quite clunky getting authorization tokens and trying to type these into the command line. So I turned to Postman, which is a graphical tool, which allows basically sending and receiving any web traffic, REST APIs, and it will break down JSON responses for you. So you can just click and cut and paste tokens. That was really good. Although the system has a kind of a 6-minute timeout for authorization, so I'd finally get something working, and then it would time out and have to start again. So then I decided just to put it into a .NET console app. So I went on Dan Clark's blog site and gratuitously stole some samples, and got a console app working. Also used Poly to help with the authentication, and from that I then extracted out a backend class library. I'll have a quick brief look at the code. So first thing to do is that we're using HTTP client, which I've newed up as a field in the class. The next thing was the authentication. So I've got this get token method, which basically does a post to a REST endpoint with a bunch of parameters, which I've sort of blocked out. That returns a JSON blob, which I've just decoded that, and there's the authentication token is in that blob. There's sort of no magic going on there. It's just getting a part of the JSON. And then I set this into the HTTP client. And from then I can just talk to it without having to worry about authentication. To set the radiator temperatures, again, it's another REST call. This time it's a post, I think. Sorry, a put. So you can put a new REST endpoint for a zone. So the URL contains like a unique code for the house and then a number for the zone of the house, which is basically maps to a radiator. And then I create another JSON blob just saying how long what temperature to go to and how long for. There's various ways of doing that, but I've just done it for a simple way. Then do a REST put. To cancel that zone, you just do a REST delete of the same endpoint, and that cancels the overlay. So this is where Poly came in as well. So I've put Poly is a set of tools where you can handle errors that happen in HTTP. So just with a single line of code, we can try to do our REST communication, and if that fails, it will then, I've set it to call the get token to reset the authentication and then try again. So finally, we're on to the front end of the Xamarin. So basically in Visual Studio, if you select a new Xamarin project, it will pop up this selection box with a bunch of different templates. There are various options. Some are available on different ones. I've gone for the blank option just for a very simple application. And I've ticked all three Android, iOS, and UWP projects. So that gives you the solution with 4 projects in it. There's obviously one for Android, one for iOS, one for UWP. I've not touched those at all. I've just left those to do whatever they do. And then there's a single shared project which you can create cross-platform application. So in here, there's main page XAML, which is the view, and there's also the code behind main page XAML CS. These come with the template, and I've also added into this the Tado controller, which is the code we just looked at for the back end, and then a view model to link the two together. So this is following a sort of view model basically pattern. So it's kind of similar to WPF. If you're wondering what the F is WPF, then you should come back on the 11th of February where Dave Ingham would give you a session all about that. But the main thing is that the view model will talk to the model and it'll expose properties which you can bind to from the view. So to send a command, I've created a property with an I command, which is then set up in the constructor to point to a method, which will then just talk to the back end and send information down and to perform the operation. So the parameters on here, the info is just the house ID. The zone in this case, because it's zone 1, would just be 1. And the temperature and the time we want to get from the user. So to do that, we can expose other properties. There's an integer where you can set and display from the user interface. We use this I notify property change pattern, which wherever the property changes, will send an event to update the user interface. So yes, the view itself, we have the code behind. This is just standard boilerplate from the template. The only thing I've added in is to new up the view model and set it as a binding context so that it knows where to link the XAML to. Again, the view is a XAML file, and it's got a handy note of place your controls here. So that's what I've done. So for slider bars for the temperature and the time, I simply made 3 controls, a label to say what the slider's for, a slider that's bound to the property in the view model, and also a label so you can see what the value is that you're sliding to. So here, obviously select temperature, I've repeated that for the override period, which is the time it's going to stay on. And I've got 3 buttons, the zone 1 test command, which I've bound to a button called living room, because it's a bit more friendly than zone 1. And then I've got another one which will set all of the rooms, and one which will do cancel everything. And this is what it looks like. So as you can see, it's almost the same, it's slightly different in each of the environments. So you sort of the three projects which I didn't touch will actually compile to native user controls. So you get a native look and feel, although it's kind of a compromise about what you actually want it to look like. You can tailor towards one or the other. Obviously, not having a Mac, I can't build the iPhone version, but I'm assuming it would look fairly similar. So this is kind of what I was originally going for, was a kind of a heat map of the whole house. I've kind of scaled back my my ambitions to just 2 sliders and a couple of text boxes, but I've got big plans. I've put all the code for what I've done so far on my GitHub, and there's also a link to from my website, so if you're interested, take a look. Thank you.